When Terry Richmond, a former Marine, cycles into the town of Shelby Springs to post bail for his cousin and hopefully buy a truck so the pair can start making an honest living, he immediately finds himself detained by two police officers after they ram him off his bike. He swiftly discovers that the town's law enforcement community is filled with corruption, all spearheaded by Police Chief Sandy Byrne. Simply wanting to get his money back that was seized, post bail, and move out of the area, he finds his plans blocked at every juncture by the force, who use legal ways to obstruct him. And as this situation escalates, it soon becomes apparent that he's going to have to fight back against the corruption and make a stand, not only for himself, but for the others in this small community who are impacted by these situations, including courthouse clerk Summer McBride. At its core, this film is First Blood, with a rather familiar tale of an ex-serviceman who's just passing through a corrupt town, but where that film, and many others that have riffed on a similar idea, swiftly descend into brutal confrontations, Rebel Ridge plays slightly differently, building the tensions through sharp dialogue exchanges, particularly between Terry and Chief Byrne. Within the dialogue, there is almost a justification for the corruption that we see, with references to defunding of law enforcement, putting communities at risk, and so the corrupt methods of obtaining funding are justified in the eyes of the police force there. As the matters escalate towards physical confrontation, Terry uses non-lethal combat training to disable those who attack him, taking the defensive approach, which is initially sparked off in a rather amusing, albeit somewhat contrived, moment when they finally discover what the acronym MAP stands for in his military profile. Initially, John Boyega was cast to play Terry, but left this project before shooting began, which allowed Aaron Pierre to step into the role, and it feels like a great fit for the rising actor, who imbues the part with a calm, focused approach. Don Johnson, as the corrupt police chief, demonstrates total star power with a menacing presence, even when he's simply chewing out pleasantries. This is the kind of role that he does so well these days, and his appearance certainly gives the familiar tale some extra impact. This is a film that, in the end, does play out pretty much how you'd expect it to, as it sticks squarely to the formula, but it stands above many of the other similar films in the manner of delivery. It never sensationalizes any moments. The first act in particular is just a slow building escalation of tension that grabs you, pulls you in to such a degree that the slightly meandering nature of the second act doesn't feel like much of an issue before the kick of the final act hits home. Writer-director Jeremy Saulnier, who previously gave us the tension of films such as Green Room, uses every trick in the book to deliver another smart and gripping take on a staple action thriller convention. On a very limited cinema release prior to the full box set release in early October, which will contain not only this documentary but also 38 previously unreleased tracks by Hendrix and 20 new mixes of other tracks, Electric Lady Studios is the latest release from the experienced Hendrix LLC team that covers the creation and construction of the famous studio that was conceived as a home studio for the legendary artist. This documentary comes from longtime archivist and documentarian for the Hendrix estate, John McDermott, and it explores what the legacy of the studio means, not only to Hendrix's name, but also to the music industry, and how it redefined what the idea of what a recording studio was. Utilising a talking heads approach, this film's a fascinating insight into how an old abandoned nightclub, which Hendrix saw as a project for a place to simply hang out and jam, evolved into a dedicated studio unlike any other, where Jimmy's creativity and sound could be allowed freedom to express in every way possible. Producer and engineer Eddie Kramer, who worked with Jimmy throughout his career, was a key figure in the concept of the studio, and he speaks prominently through the documentary about what makes this studio so different and special. Intermixed with snippets of music, chats with friends and colleagues of Hendrix, as well as those who worked on the construction, the film gives insight into the problems that were encountered, the ideas that were thrown out, and the passion that won through in the end to bring the studio to life. This is a fascinating documentary for fans and non-fans alike. As someone who's always been fascinated with the locations that are used to record music and how each environment lends its own personality to the sound mix that we get. Any documentaries that tell us what makes each venue so special to artists who record there are right up my alley. And being a fan of Hendrix is just the icing on the cake here, making this, much like McDermott's other works, essential viewing. Packed with names such as Steve Winwood, Buddy Guy, Dave Palmer, Mitch Mitchell, and many more, using new interviews and some old archive footage, as well as previously unreleased footage of Hendrix himself. This is another great testament to the legacy of music that Jimmy's life brought, and how, through the studio itself, his impact and presence is still felt.